Hemshech Ayin Beis, Volume 1, we're up to Discourse 35, page 265, Ba'alescha. Well, let's sum up where we're at. So the Rebbe Rashab is explaining to understand the difference between the Ovis and Matan Torah, where the Ovis transmitted or draw down the energy into existence, and the structure of existence, but to the extent, the maximum extent that you can bring the Elokus, godliness, into existence, ad bli dai, as we spoke, that in existence it's to the maximum parameters. Matan Torah will be a er chadash, a new energy that was unprecedented. So the Bir Ayin in the last Maimon, the second day of Shavuos, chapters 134 through 136, says Bir Ayin, and in Bepardes there's two types of Yechudim. One which is maintenance, a maintenance contract, Lashpia Shefel Ekim Elamis, Chaz Shoshanis, and this is all the way till the perfection, even before Eitz Hadas, Chet Eitz Hadas. And another is innovative energy, something new, something unprecedented, something never transmitted ever before. And to explain those two Yechudim, we went into the Arizal's Kabbalah. Arizal, these two Yechudim is called Yichud Yisrael Saba V'Tfuna, is the lower Yichud. That's the maintenance. And then you have, that's Avo Tatoin, as he calls it, Abba V'Ima Tatoin, Chochma Bina Tatoin. And then you have, the second is Yichud Abba V'Ima Eloyin, Shehin Atzmus HaMech, which is the core intelligence, which actually we didn't even discuss yet. He primarily discussed the first one, Yisrael Saba Tfuna. To understand Yisrael Saba Tfuna, went into a whole discussion, what is Yisrael Zuta? If there's Saba, there's a Zuta. Saba means the great one, or the aged one. Zuta is the small one. And then there's Yaakov. So briefly, it's all about Meichen and Midas, and Meichen's relationship, intelligence and emotions. So Yaakov is the lower level. Yaakov is primarily Midas, that is informed by intelligence, but intelligence there is mostly concealed. It's like he says, Psak Halacha is the reason given for a Halacha. Halacha here would be the Midah, meaning the resolution, the ruling. In Aveda, it's the element of Elokei, Ahavas Hashem Elokecha Kihu Chayecha. It's your benefit, so it's your emotional need. You feel the need for it, and there's some reason behind it. Then comes Yisrael Zuta. So Yaakov, as he said, is the Matam Achazeh, below the chest. It's the lower part of the Midas, meaning the lower part of Zah. The higher part of Zah is Yisrael Zuta. Yisrael Zuta, meaning is Nar Yisrael already. Now we're talking Yisrael, but it's still in the state of Nar. What is Nar Yisrael? Because it's already. Let me just see a second. Yeah. So Yisrael Zut is already. It's still Midas. But now you're talking already, the Midas are being informed by a more mature intelligence. So they're maturing the Midah too. We discussed that at length. So Meichen the godless is causing the Midas to be also godless. But it's still primarily Midas. Like he gave either Maratchi Kochenzich, the passion in learning Torah, the kissing of Rab Shimon because he heard something profound. But it's still Midas. Then comes Yisrael Saba, which is really what we want to discuss. Yisrael Saba. So Saba is the level of Meichen itself. So now we're in the domain, the patzuf of intelligence. But intelligence itself, there's also Midas. But here the Midas are primarily intellectual emotions, so to speak. And he explains it in two ways. A lower level is the excitement, intellectual excitement. The excitement. That too, there's two levels. There's a hidden emotions where you're so immersed in the subject matter you can't even feel and sense the excitement. And then there's a place where you do, it's more the external, more superficial understanding where you do sense it. But then comes the primary meaning of midas. And here's like a chiddush in what the word midah means actually. We usually define midah as emotion. Question is it an emotion that is either impulsive, or is it an emotion that's guided by intelligence? Is it an emotion that's matured by intelligence? Is it an emotion, an excitement that comes as a result of intelligence? Here he explains that there's another thing in midah, and midah here from the word nitiyah. Not midah as an emotion, but midah as an inclination. An inclination, that an intelligent concept, can be inclined to zeicha, or to be chayiv, to chesed or to gvura, or to din. So there, when a judge or someone who's a scholar is reviewing a subject matter, and there's going to be applications from this idea, the idea includes all kinds of directions it can go into. It can go this way. So the application, so to speak, the inclination, the netiyah, and the bechein is the midah here. He says, and this is a far more subtle and higher level of a midah in the meichen. So meichen be'etzem is really, as he explained at length, is really, what's the word I want to use? Internal. You travel inward. Midas cannot be a midah without dealing with someone else. Meichen works best when it's on its own. Because he says, because be'etzem meichen are atzmi. Meichen is etzem. And midas is already expression. So once meichen is already intelligence, is already coming closer to some conclusion, you're already talking a yurida. And this is Yisrael Saba. Yisrael Saba is this level where the mind begins to relate to some type of inclination, whether it may be chesed or gvura. But it's still an intellectual driven energy. It's not an emotion, as we said before, a feeling. Is the intellect is being mechayiv and saying, all that I know tells me that this person is this person prevails, and the other one is wrong. This one's right, this one's wrong. So midah here is not a personal subjective feeling about it. It's a conclusion that has a very particular application, a particular midah called chesed. So here chesed is not the excitement that you love what you're learning. It's the idea that you're learning has led you to a conclusion that's a chesed conclusion. So it's far more cognitive than it is emotional. Then he explains that in this itself, there's the two levels. There's the midas in chachma, and there's the midas in bina. What does this mean? Midas in chachma is that a person who has this, goes through this cognitive process, just senses that this is chesed and this is din. He can't really explain it. It's just almost an intellectual intuition. That's chachma. And bina is where they can explain and fully give an argument why this one's right and this one's wrong, or why this chesed or why gvura, or why din. But either way, this is higher than hispilus sichli, the excitement that comes in seichel. And this is the level of Yisrael Saba. Then he continued in the last chapter that we learned, in chapter 136, that this is also the meaning of Sharei Bina. What does it mean, Sharei Bina? Or the gates of Bina? Because a gate implies that there is an area that you're in. He says a chutz or a courtyard. And at the end of the courtyard there's a gate. So he explains the courtyard is the cognitive process. The gate is already when you come into a place where you, like he says, a yitziyah from the intellectual comprehension to a particular direction. That's a shar. So there's a shar that goes to chesed, there's a shar that leans towards gvura, etc., etc. Then he explained there's two types of sha'arim. One is from the intellect, from the courtyard of your mind. You end up with a certain inclination, chesed and gvura. Then there's a second, he said, there's a lower gate where meichen leads to midas, to actual feelings. So this is what he calls a higher gate and a lower gate. Tarei, he says the words was exact words. See a pnimis. He said, "Yesh tarin eloyin v'tarin tatoyin." On the bottom of page Reish Samach Gimel 263. There are higher gates and there are lower gates. And that's why we say Susharim Reshechem twice. The two different types of gates. So these are in Bina itself. There's the gate. That's the Yitziyah L'chutz Me'ameichen Lias Teldes Hamidus. That's the lower gate. That the mind itself is leaving the so-called all possibilities, all the different possibilities. You know, when you're in the intellectual process, the cognitive process, you review every possible way, and then you come to a certain conclusion, intellectual conclusion. And then there's the so-called application as it moves into the actual midas and feelings. So we've established that Yisrael Saba, all this is coming to explain the level of Yisrael Saba and Tfuna. So Yisrael Saba is what? Is the Midas and Chochmah, and Tfuna is the Midas and Bina. And we say Midah here, the main meaning of Midah here is not as an emotional excitement, but an inclination. As I said, an intellectual application of Chesed, intellectual application of Gvura. Like a judge who rules. You're right, you're wrong. Zeiche Chayiv. Zakai Chayiv. Or you say kosher, posel. These are midas, kosher and posel. They're chesed and gvura. But they're purely midas of meichin. Whereas the intellect itself, prior to its conclusion, is really combines and includes them all. And the last section that we learned, he says, "B'prati is Ayin." I'm reading Reish Samach Daled now. Is Yisrael? This is now nihi of Abba and Ima. So before he was talking that it's that Yisrael Saba is Chochmah and the midas of Chochmah, that is. That was the inclination that Chochmah, which we said, like the Hisamtus, you sense something is right, Shosik Rav, even though you don't have explanation. He can't explain it in words. And Tfuna is the midas in Bina. Now he says it's Nihi. Basically Nihi. So it's not just midas in general, it's the lower level of the midas. Now what's the difference between chagas in something and nihi? So in Tanya he says, Yesh HaKedesh, that nihi refers to the mashpia. Let's say nihi of the meichin refers to how the mashpia is preparing himself to connect with and preparing how to communicate an idea. So you could have the idea itself, and you're not interested. You're not focusing on communicating the idea. You yourself on your own are thinking. As we said, meichin is beyond midas. It's ideas, and you will think about it in every possible angle. Chesed, gvura. You'll stretch the idea in every direction. If someone has already an inclination before they begin, it's not an intellectual process. That's a bias. So a real cognitive process is no biases. But then comes a point you want to explain it. So Chesed and Gvura would be more, okay, is this Mechayev or Mezakeh? Is this something that leads us to conclude that there's merit here, or it concludes that we reject it? But then there's Nihi. Nihi is the focus within intelligence, the ability to communicate it to others. So Netzach and Hoid are called Kloyes Yoyitzes, which means like advisors. The kidneys that advise, referring to different parts of the body that have so-called that quality. So Netzach and Hoid advise. Yisod is the bond that he says in Tanya. Here he doesn't go into the details, but basically Nihi is like he puts it, Nihi. So now there's two things: there's Nihi and Chachma, and there's Nihi and Bina. What's the difference between the two? And I think what I maybe was confused and I keep going back to it because the question here is: it seems to me now that he's talking within the mashpia. This is all within the person who's conceiving of the idea, and now he's moving to the next stage that he's going to communicate the idea. So there's a nihi in his chachma, there's a nihi in his bina. So let's start like this: nihi and chachma. So what does he say? There's two things. Chachma on its own is removed; it's detached. You get an idea; it's like a flash. So you could initially, ostensibly say chachma has no relationship to the lower levels. It's a flash of an idea. If you're lucky, Bina grabs it and develops it. If you're not, the flash goes where most ideas go. Right? So he says no. And Mashiach b'chachma, so Nihi of Chachma does something. It creates handles, so to speak. Mashiach b'chachma keich liz b'chinas his pashtus is gal's chutz la'atzmei shel Chachma. So that Chachma, even though Chachma is coming, is a spark from Keser, from let's call the unconscious. It's not a spark that just disappears. There's a Nihi in Chachma that allows it to connect to Bina, connect downward. So that's what he says. That's what Nihi is, the koyach that should go outside of its Chachma. And he says there are two things in this. In the Nihi itself, there's two elements. There's two. One is the koyach hagil la'atzmei. That's not just a flash and idea, but you can actually, let's put it this way, you can be aware of this idea to some extent. The Beis the chachma that's the masag connected. Yesh ba keich liz ba the asaga. And the second thing, agili el hanivdul memenu. That not only can you be aware and cognizant of your idea, and not just it disappears like a flash of lightning. Because you could say basically chachma is like a flash of lightning. It comes and goes. As I said, if you're lucky, something grabs it, but chachma on its own is elusive. So he's saying the he of chachma gives it some type of that handles exactly, and that you can even talk about this idea to yourself, and then share with someone. You say, I had an idea today. So that mere fact that you can say I had an idea, even if it's not developed, we're not talking about bina yet, is already the nihi of chachma. That's what he's saying. Okay, I'm just talking it out here because it's a little. So that second is al hanivdul memenu. V'zeu inyan klo yisrael says that's netzach yisod. That's nihi. Eich lahashpia, how to transmit it. Now you're not really transmitting it yet because it's still chachma. Remember, it's not bina yet. V'hu lahamtzi inyanim eich lahavis ayin sichli el azulas, and that's basically that chachma has within it the seeds, the handles, to be able to explain it to another, besides to yourself.
Every chachma spark comes with a nihi.
It potentially comes. It's our work to do the nihi, obviously, because if it can just disappear. Nihi is like a
reveal the
right. In other words, chachma has within it everything from chesed, from chachma. Every sphere has all 10 spheres in it. But obviously, you're going to have to do something about it. For example, you hear an idea, you want to communicate it. So you're going to have to work on revealing the nihi.
So basically, once that just flashed by, you missed the plot. You missed the moving side.
Most ideas just flash by, actually. Some of them we don't even remember.
You didn't catch that nihi, basically.
Yeah, you can say that. Yeah, you could say that. I mean, he doesn't go into how. He's talking what. The how needs to be discussed, but clearly there's an element of klei sheitzes. It's very subtle because you see we're not even talking nihi and atzilus, the lowest nihi that's going to the mash makabel. We're talking nihi and the chachma. It's such a dakasdika level. It's in the spark is already the beginnings of this connection. Basically, it's the handle to bina. It's the channel. It's the gate into bina. That's what it looks like. He doesn't say that also specifically, but it sounds to me like that. But then he goes like this: okay.
Maybe Muslim doesn't mean handles here, like you said.
Yeah. Okay. Gam yesh leimer shezo medida benekudas hachachma. Even more subtly, this is the medida nekudas hachachma. Remember, we speak about chachma as a yud, a letter yud. So usually we speak as yud that we have no way to capture a spark on paper. So the closest you have is a point. But really, it's not even a point. I mean, it's a point, but meaning it's a way for us. But we look at a yud, there's another side. The Chassidus talks that the yud actually has a kreitzer shel yud, has a top, has a bottom, has a middle, when you break it down. So overall, it's just a point. But Chachma does have in it a nihi, which means that says that's the medida in the Kudas Chachma she'ef shalavim men lidei hashpa'ah lazulas. This is, as I said, a little subtler than what he said before. Before, it's like a tool that's outside of Chachma, but allows you to hold on to Chachma. Chachma itself actually has a medida. That's what nihi is. Okay. And now comes tfuna. So tfuna now is again nihi within bina. Okay. This is the meaning that you absorb and you contain. Klita means when something settles in and it's like to stay. You can say it's like a permanence. Niklat. It's not just passing by. Not just a tourist. It's a resident. Okay. So that's niklat. What means niklat in seichel? That the things that leitzach by you, that you really get it. So he says, this is b'yesir ba'kelim shekli mechen hen kelim l'kabel er seichel. This is increasingly more important, but primarily in the containers. See, Chachma doesn't really have containers. Chachma is a spark. So here you're already talking tfuna, containers. They're kelim l'kabel er seichel litfus u'liklet esev hu'in hisyashvus b'kelim. This is the hisyashvus. And he calls this a tafsan. Tafsan means someone that grasps. Tafsan means someone that gets it. He says there are two types of tafsan. There's one who gets it more and externally, which means he doesn't fully comprehend it, but he gets You can say he gets it in a general sense. And then what he's talking here, we're talking about Tfisa B'chinas Klita. Here we're talking about someone who really grasps it and internalizes it. U'shadavar niflas niflas b'kli meichei, she'yedei maskas adavar b'teiv me'ed. And when that happens, ha'er misalim b'zeh she'en mer b'gilei kol kach. So the er ha'seichel then gets concealed. It's not revealed. It's not as revealed because now it's so-called internalized within the container. So in other words, like Chochmah, you'd say the energy is far higher. Here, the focus is far more on the containment of the energy. And this is again all seemingly in the Mashpia. And here it goes. Okay. So you have the idea has now become contained. This tfuna, which is nihi of bina, the klita, is a container. So he uses the word container 2 lines before, so probably it's connected to keli. This is a keli because in nihi of Abba it doesn't appear like there's kelim there. Nihi are handles. It's true that in Chochmah you have the sparks, the seeds of it being manifest, like he said before. Eich, what were the words you used? Eich lashpi avul hamtzin yonim eich gilil. Yeah, but there's no keli where it should be contained. This becomes the keli for nihid abba. Leida eich lashpi, like he said in the Kitzur. That the leida eich lashpi is not going on nihi of abba; it's going on nihi of bina. Right? That's the key here. Let me go back. Was it v'gam l'shan tafsim pnim v'gam l'shanis in yoni hezber become me'efanim. Lishnis. So what is he saying here? To lay the eich lahashpia. So even though he said nihi of Abba already is knowing how to be mashpia, but here's the keli for it. L'shanesi lavei become yanim shenim. So clearly this brings it down even further. And this is my mamukim ish tfunis yadlano shadela mashkal acher. Tfunis. The word is here that focuses on the word tfuna. That through niklat etzle inyan betuv yecholti l'haves inyan elazulas. By him containing the idea, well, he can explain it to another. Where I got confused, and it's still not perfect for me, to be honest, is that, when initially it appears that he's saying that tfuna is the keli to help chokhmah, so to speak, reach into others. Right? Why? Because bina is the klita of it. And once you were able to contain it, you're able to explain it to others. Okay, I guess that's the way it means here. So in other words, the mashpi himself begins with nihi of Abba, which is like the general seeds of how to explain it. And in bina, because it gives it a container and it's more fully understand, he'd be able to niklat, it's klita. So that brings out the nihi of Abba into action, so to speak, into details. That's what apparently he's saying. Right? That's how you said you understood it?
Yeah. But I don't know how you got
the thing is, the problem, it's not so much a problem. So then question would be, what would be with nihi if there was no nihi of Abba? If you only had Abba, Chochmah, and that jumps to Bina, and Bina is the Klita, and Bina has nihi that tells you.
Within the Chochmah. The Bina within Chochmah?
No, it's not within. It's Tfuna. It looks like it's not within. It's a Chochmah Bina. So what the argument with the answer would be, what you would be missing is that yes, you would be able to explain some of it, but the real intensity of the original idea would really never be able to be explained to somebody. Maybe that's the meaning. In other words, if you don't have the nihi of Abba, of Ima, maybe that was what I was looking at. See, because when I read that, it sounded to me that's the power to be able to explain it. But he's saying here, this is the keli for that. Right. And he says almost the same, but there he said, eich lahashpia, and here he says, l'shanese, levi becoming yanim shenim. That he doesn't say before. Before he said, here's what he say, la hamtzin yanim eich lahavis inyan sichle lazulas. In other words, the general idea of how to bring it to another. But the details, becoming yanim shenim, to actually do it, you need to contain the idea. In other words, a person has, let's put it this way, if a person has a flash of an idea, okay, so Nihi gives it handles that it could possibly be contained and drawn down. But it's not drawn down yet. Then comes Bina, where you yourself start a klita. You begin to take the seed of Chochmah, and it settles into you. It's like a b'me'ima, actually, Abba ve'ima. The seed of the father, Chochmah, enters the womb, but it settles, it's fertilized. So now the idea has taken hold. Klita means it can begin to develop. So now, because the Nehi of Abba planted the seed that you can communicate to another, Bina brings it out into full fruition, because now you contain it, and now you're able to actually take it, Abba and Ima together, and bear a child, and explain it to another person. If you didn't have Nehi of Abba, it would be like having a mother without a father, essentially.
But everything we learn is 10.
So, hold on. Yeah, no, I understand. But basically, more practically, it would be that the intensity of Chochmah, like you said, the area that's not Nelam. In Bina, it's Nelam. Yes, you're getting it contained, but on the other hand, the Chochmah is being concealed. The intensity. That Nehi of Abba says the intensity even of the original idea also travels through Bina, and the Nehi of Bina allows it to be communicated. So you can not just communicate to your student the comprehension of the idea, you can also communicate the excitement and the passion of that original innovation, that energy.
That'll only get after 40 years.
Halavai.
That intensity.
Halavai. No, but that you're adding. He doesn't say that here, but fine. Just I'm going to qualify. This is Rabbi Moshe is adding his commentary.
No, but it's Nihid Da'ava, so it only has to take 9 months.
The Rebbe once said, if you have one person generation that went 40 years, he could already explain it to the rest that are younger than 40. The Rebbe answers a fundamental question. It says at the end of the Torah. Moshe says, we went through 40 years of the wilderness, now you can, and there was a lot of people who were born, the people going into Eretz Yisrael were all born afterwards. So they're not 40 yet. There's people born in Midbar. So the Rebbe says that there are people who already got it, and they can already explain it. Because Abayim Shana is only individual. It's not, you can't say for a generation. There in Pasuk, it's not just individuals. Mashma the whole generation.
There's only 2 people there.
Yeah, but I'm saying, but no, Kol Yifuna would remain, but the whole generation, yeah. The Rebbe said at Yachas to Yud Beis Tammuz once that the people 40 years from Yud Beis Tammuz, he says, most people here were not there, but Yud Beis Tammuz is because there's some people that were, I guess the Rebbe himself, so they could give you the taste of it. Obviously it doesn't come to 40, but to go back to this, okay, so this is the pshat. Mm-hmm. It's very subtle, and I think it's made it because you talk about the switches of the interface. Let's go back to the big interface. What we have here is we really have, as I said, Ayin Beis is a meticulous, almost like engineering of existence, and every switch has to be counted for. One switch missing, and it's like you can have you have an electrician come, he can't figure out the problem. And sometimes it's some stupid little thing. But that one little thing, you take that away, the whole thing doesn't work, no matter how big the machine is. So here, every step is critical. So I see here some new steps that that we didn't really spell out before. And that is, number one, we're talking about the Ovis ultimately. Remember, this is going to be the Ovis. Yisrael Saba Tfuna, the Yichud of Yisrael Saba Tfuna, which didn't even focus on so much, but it's clear that the Yichud is that they're able to reconnect. After the Chet Tzadaz, there was a disconnect. Let's put it this way. If you talk about an electrical circuit, there was a cutoff. 7 generations made 7 cutoffs. When you say the Shekhinah went up, it doesn't mean physically, it means 7 cutoffs. Avram began to reconnect. This reconnect, you're connecting Eir Ein Sof, but Eir Ein Sof, as he manifests, as he said, Eir HaGvul, to create existence. We're talking here about maintaining and sustaining existence. Because Chet Tzadaz didn't just compromise the Bligvul. Didn't just compromise the transcendent, it compromised the basic awareness that there's a God even in nature. It compromised the Lakim, not just Havaya. Because people began Avodah Zarah. They denied there was a God. So Avram brought back the Eir HaGvul, as he says, to the fullest extent possible. To make the world filled with godliness, but only to the parameters of structure of existence. That's great. But is it only because Matan Torah would do more? But don't minimize what it is. Yeah, Kelelam. It's godly. The Welt is Alakus. Imagine revealing that everything you see in the world is godliness. Except it's not the bleak vul of godliness, it's the godliness that manifests. You look at a table, you see that God's energy. So let's not minimize this. I'm just saying that. So this is just mamala kalam. This is just sherish agvul. But to the full extent possible. What is the expression they say? They will be prosecuted to the full extent possible.
Full extent of the law.
Anything you say
Right.
can be used against you.
Yeah. Here's the opposite. Everything you say can be used for you, but to the full extent. Okay. So what you need here, therefore, the maximum would be not just bringing into the world a diminished level of elokus, but as much as you can. So you need Yisrael Saba and Tfuna, because you want to bring the passion and the intensity of the original idea Chochmah. You want to make sure that it's niklat, and that doesn't disappear again. What Avram did, that Noach didn't do, was Enosh. There were also tzaddikim before Avram, but they didn't make it last. Avram was the first that said Yitzhava as Bonav as Beis Achrav. He built a family. He built a community. He built a nation that was ready to stand by Matan Torah, which is one of the reasons that Matan Torah was not in the beginning of creation, because God wanted a keli for it. He didn't want to just be Mamshech Haner. He wanted it to remain. The first 10 generations messed it up. They got all the gifts, like the Gemara says, Nizunim b'chazir shel Kadosh Baruch Hu. They were sustained by God's love. That's where they lived, and they lived almost 1,000 years. But like the Rabbi speaks in Sichos, but there was no klita. It wasn't theirs. It was a gift. It was like a wealthy father showering his child with gifts. He'll ultimately be spoiled, and he was spoiled, and they destroyed the world. That's the first 10 generations. Avram came lahoyer. He came to bring back life, but sustainable. That it should be now something that will perpetuate. So the whole point of the Avos was to create an environment in the world that is conducive and receptive to godliness. Like we said earlier, to make kalim of elokus, to make kalim. The Frierdiker Rebbe adds words that Avram was able to explain to Anoshim Pshutim elokus, godliness. Made kalim of people. Megayer Anoshim, Megayres Anoshim. Megayres Anoshim, Megayres Anoshim. In other words, he created a real dira. It wasn't yet Matan Torah, obviously, but it was powerful. So therefore, you need to have, in the spheres, what this means is you need the intensity of Chochmah, which is bringing from Elokus, into Bina, and to make sure that you know how to be mashpiyat, that it should be receptive to them, and this is why every step here is critical. So this really is amazing.
Skip this whole thing.
So it's unbelievable.
Just get the gifts.
It's unbelievable because, in other words, take away one step here. That's why I'm wondering. That's why I'm saying you have to have why nihi of Abba, and you need nihi of Bina. Every step is necessary. Take one away, and something is missing. This is good. Very good.
I have a question.
Let me just 1 second.
He could have gone to a nihi of Chochmah of Abba. He could have went down and down and down and down.
Mm-hmm. Very good. So that's Yisrael Saba and Tfuna. And we have the avoid of it in our lives. It means that when you're being mashpia on somebody, it's not just enough to give them a little taste, an appetizer. You have to apply yourself. That's nihi. And you have to apply yourself even from the actual point. You don't want them just to get the conclusion of your idea, the midas. You don't just want them to get the cognitive process. You want them to get the chacham itself, where it originated. Where it originated. Yeah, it's beautiful. Because many times, the Rebbe, we are able to understand, let's say, a mitzvah or a campaign, once he explains it, why we're doing this, like why mitzvah tefillin. But there was always, that last point was the mystery of, like, why this one, not this one. Because it's a Shabbos. He didn't do mitzvah Shabbos. Like a neshek. And I'm not asking a question. I'm just saying that the bina of the Rebbe we understood because he explained it in most cases. The chokhmah, but the truth is, when you really think about it, I don't know about the mivtzayim, but even the whole idea of shlichus and everything the Rebbe did, you really think about it. Once the Rebbe did it, because he was the leader, he's the chokhmah. We can develop it once we hear the point. But you can also understand where it came from, because you see that the Rebbe looked at the challenges of our generation, looked at the abilities we have, and matched it to, and created a system that would work. And the proof is in the pudding. It's a workable model. There are thousands of shluchim out there. So in other words, a workable model, no matter how, despite the Yeridas Haderes that our generation is not the highest ones, despite that we're not in the highest levels, the need was filled. I'm not saying everything is done perfectly, there's plenty of work to be done, but the model was laid out, and you could go back to the Chochmah of the Rebbe and understand that when he conceived it, like what he said in the first Maimar. So my point is, I'm trying to say is that the goal here is not just to convey to a student, okay, here's the marching orders, or I'll give you even some of the logic, the Tam of the Psak Din. We spoke, that was Yaakov. Not enough to say Yisrael Zuta, which is a more mature understanding of the concept. We already but you need Yisrael Saba and Tfuna, which is like, in other words, go all the way to the beginning of the process, communicate that Nehi of that, and all the way through of Bina, and all the way that it should be able to be received by people. Yeah, good. I think this is a good conclusion of that. Ubavedi says Yashlem Ayin Atfuna. I'll take your question a minute. Let me just. Ubavedi Yashlem Ayin Atfuna Liyas Shebechol Hasoga L'Kis Tzarich Liyas Ezemida. This also was, what was he adding here? An Aveda. What's Tfuna? Aha. In Chochmeh, you don't yet have the real midah. We said we have it, but it's very subtle and also very, as you said earlier, it's like shasuk rav. Tfuna means that every contemplation should have a midah. Okay, now I understand. Because there are things that apparently you could say it's an idea that doesn't have a connection to a particular conclusion. Who says everything has to have a conclusion? Midah here, he doesn't just mean hispilus. He means here like a schus, or nafkamina, basically. You could say it's abstract, b'chein, right? An application. And Tfuna makes sure that every seichel has an application. Why not Nehi of Chachma? Let me go back to Nehi of Chachma, because Chachma remains a spark. It's still a flash, that's why. And Chachma, the midah of Chachma still is only, it's a samtus ha-seichel. It's the power of the seichel, but you can't really, it's not niklat. It's not brought down.
But that's Nehi of Abba, the same thing, no?
Yeah, that's Chachma. Abba and Chachma is the same. But it's not enough. It's like the father's seed. Abba, the father without the mother. For the development of the fetus, for the development of the life, you need to have the klita. It has to settle in, and it has to come down to anaf kamina. It's almost what they say, Babini Yisrael Nitna Be'isha. A man can come up with great ideas, and often they're not practical. You need someone to say, okay, here's application time. Very good. This is excellent.
Basically, it means Haskalah of Chassidus without the
yeah. And then in the end of the Maimer, he went to the Avoy Lon Yivot Atan. Do me a favor, keep a sense of the time. What time is it now? Today I have to finish earlier because I have to give a Kabbalah day in Manhattan. I have to teach a little later.
He's bringing Kabbalah to the masses.
Yeah. Crispy will be there too.
Oh, yeah. It is?
Yeah.
Okay, could be.
I think it's $45 it wants to go, I think. You go? No.
And the end of the Maimer, he goes back to Abba V'im Tatan, Abba V'im Ilan. The Yeshaya was like the lower Yichud of Shemayim Ba'aretz, and Moshe was the higher. Because Yisrael Saba only brings it in to say the Ishtalshlus. And the Abba V'im brings a new Hamshacha that comes after through Teira. 1 second. Okay. We're going to learn the next Maimer. We'll go a little further. Go ahead. What do you want to ask me?
I'm not clear about we said that Yud has three, Kosel Shal Yud, the Teich, and the end of it. And what's a chiddush to me here was that you're going from Chachma back to the bottom, and you're skipping, so to speak, the Teich, the Bina of Chachma. Is there a Bina of Abba? We went from the Chachma of Abba to the Nehi, which transfers it to the Bina. What about the middle part of the Chachma? There's no Bina within the Chachma itself affecting anything here?
He doesn't discuss it here.
No Chagas either.
Chagas is the Bina.
We're
talking about within Seichel. The Chachma is the Chachma.
No, I don't need.
He doesn't need today.
They're having the Kabbalah Center people also.
What, a powder and that one's the... Huh?
No, it's 79th Street by...
The JCC.
Oh no, I'm thinking about something done at 79th Street.
Why? 86?
No,
The JCC. The west side, JCC?
West side?
No,
Or east side?
what's the show on
West side.
79th Street? They're doing something like that. Maybe it's not today.
Today's West side. What time does it begin?
I have to be there 11.
I know people are coming here first time. No, that's home.
Okay, so first of all, he's not. He doesn't go into that here. Simple as that. It's what he discusses. I mean, he spoke about the midas of chachma, which is basically like either the excitement or the inclinations. The chachma leads to a
Midas within Chachma, but in order to give still Bina. Bina is the Ima of Chachma, right? Of Midas.
Is there something missing here? You're trying to fit it into something you've learned elsewhere.
I'm just trying to understand what's happening to Bina there. That's all.
Bina tfuna.
No, within the Chachma, you see, it just doesn't discuss it.
No, and what is? Yeah.
It's interesting. It goes from the highest level right down to Nihi, grabs it with these handles.
It's Nihi within Chachma. It's not Nihi.
Nihi of Chachma. I understand.
Yeah.
But there should be a Bina. Where's the Bina of Chachma?
They don't go into it.
That's okay. That's what I'm saying. Okay, so it doesn't go into it.
He's there.
So we'll learn a little more here. Okay. Okay, Ba'aleschus Haneres Almul Pnei Haner. This is Discourse 35. The last summary of the Frierdiker Rebbe and the Maimer was quite cryptic. The last one was Yisrael Sal B'Tvina Midah Shebemechen Atzman. And this one he calls Hasaga Berichuk Mina Etzem. Comprehension that's distant from the core. Okay, Ba'aleschus Haneres Almul Pnei Haner. So this is Shabbos Pasha Ba'aleschus Tafrei Ayin Gimel 100 years ago. You shall kindle the flames, the candles. El Mul Panei Haner, standing facing the face of the menorah. Ye'iru Shiva Saneres. And the 7 flames, the 7 branches, the 7 candles will radiate. V'sorach l'hava ma'u Pnei HaMenorah. What is the meaning of Pnei HaMenorah? Face of the candelabra, of the menorah. She'amar al mul pnei menorah ye'iru. What is the meaning of that? Gam tzarich lahav havelei lemer shisha haneres. Tapi poshet pnei menorah hanera amtzai. If you're standing by pnei menorah, which is the middle, and there's 3 on both sides, so you should have said shisha haneres, 6 candles. Because pnei menorah is already said. Al mul pnei menorah means the middle one, and here Shiva Shisha Nedus from both sides. 6 others, 3 on each side.
Pashas, it means that you put the candles that they should be closer on both sides. They should be facing the middle.
Okay, but Ba'aleschus, he's talking about Ba'aleschus, the lighting of them.
Means that they should be facing the.
Yeah. Ba'aleschus Al Mul Pnei Haner. Okay, in other words, a comma after Ba'aleschus Haner. Ba'aleschus Haner light the flames. And how should Al Mul Pnei Haner is that the 6 should be facing the middle one? Yeah, I'm saying that's
flamers towards the middle.
Yeah, so I was reading Ba'aleschus Haner El Mul Pnei Haner, and then the Yiru is a separate thing. In other words, the El Mul Pnei Haner is going the Habon, not the. Okay. Yeah. The Imken Avalem is Shish Haneres. Mao Shivas Haneres. What is 7? So in other words, the pasuk is saying light the candles, and Al Pnei Haner and facing the center. The center, across the face of the menorah, which is the menorah, should be not 7, 6, because that's how it should look. In other words, it should be like that. Yeah. Rashi brings from the Medrash that when Aaron in Parsha Nosei, we had the story of all the Nesiim, all the leaders of the tribes. They brought their offerings in dedicating the Beis Hamikdash and Mishkan. So when he saw that, Chol Shadaite, his mind weakened. He felt bad. Why? Because why? Because it says like, look, they're bringing all this, and what am I doing? Kohen Gadol. Amalei HaKadosh Baruch Hu Chayich Shalcha Gadol Mishalehem. You should know on your life, basically, you could say, that in truth, yours is greater than theirs. Because you kindle and will and repair and clean and beautify the natives. He doesn't answer. He just says to him, "You'll do. Yours is greater than theirs." He says, "What you'll do the menorah." But what? Why is it greater? Why is it greater than the offerings of the tribe leaders? To understand all this, we have to preface what we learned earlier. Yisrael Sabatun is the midas of Chochmah and Bina. Yisrael Sabat, midas of Chochmah, Avot. And as we explained, it's not the emotions and seichel, the spile seichel, that a person gets excited, his mind gets excited by an idea. We're talking about midas as they are in the actual structure of the mind. See? It's the intelligence as it leans and inclines and drawn to a particular application, to a particular conclusion. Chesed, Gvura. So it's not the midah as a midah excitement. Midah, that's excitement. Midas are emotions. It's not the emotions in the mind. It's the inclinations in the mind, which will later can become midas. So a person like a judge could basically be dispassionate. He could say, a classic story where the judge can say, "You win. You brought the case to the court. You win the money or whatever. You win. You're going to dance and celebrate." The judge goes home. It doesn't. For him, it was just simply a meichendik thing that brought to his chus. For you, it comes into emotion. For him, it doesn't. So you see, the midah is there, but for him, it's an intellectual process. Yeah.
But he might have his own midas, and at the end said, "Well, I had to say it, but I wish I wouldn't have to."
What? You have the classic story where they say about the guy in the olden days where a guy could not read, people couldn't read, so they hired readers, right? So they hired people to read. So they read. So a letter arrives, and they hire someone to read it. And while he's reading, he suddenly faints because the guy was reading that his father died. So the reader went because to him it doesn't care. He's just reading. He's just being paid to read. It doesn't matter to him whether it's a simcha or a tragedy. But the son can't read, but it's negated to him. The ends of it's actually, I never thought about it this way because it answers a lot of questions when you talk about midas and meichen. The mother's midas doesn't always mean what we think is just emotions in the mind. What does it mean, emotions in the mind? So yes, so there's an excitement element that you could learn something, get excited. But he's saying that's not it. It's actually the inclination. It's very good. No, it's chesed and gevura from the top down. Doesn't begin as a midah as we know it, as a full-blown emotion. It begins as an inclination. Chesed, gevura, chesed to the right, gevura to the left.
Like Hillel Shammai,
Yeah, seichel on its own goes all directions and looks at the subject in every possible way. No, it's just it's a beautiful way to see the process. And detail, as we learned at the end, it's the nihi, as we said, the handles of Abba Nima. And this is that the moichen should come to a muchus nivdal, like he said, to something outside of them. So it's not just the inclination of chesed and gvura of a judge, it's actually explaining it, that ultimately should be explained to someone outside. That's really what Avram the Avos did. That's why this addition is negay. If you don't bring the he, it remains okay. The judge. So Avram, the Avos were like judges. They told it. They said what they said. And they went back home. They brought it down into the world. They brought it down into nivdal mehem, into something nivdal mehem. And it starts with nihi, like he said, nivdal. The first chachma first starts that's a gilui la'atzmei, and then it's a gilui l'zulasei, and the bina klita tfuna brings it down all the way. Okay. This is the idea of mayim amukim, deep waters. Ish tfunis, a man of understanding. Yadlen draws. Shadela, he draws, Omashke, and waters, or feeds, or sustains, mashke, gist, say, pours for others. So he's the Shad HaMashkin. He's the guy with the bottle. It's taken from here and pouring to here. That's very nice. Okay, that's Tfuna. So he's taken from Chochmah and pouring it to down. That's good. Now, this doesn't get easier, my friends. This is going to get real Kabbalistic. Be'etz Chaim, rather. Now, it says in Eitz Chaim, chapter Kuf Lamed Zayin, Shar Yudalet Perek Dalet. In case you want to look it up. Eitz Chaim, Shar Yudalet Perek Dalet. The Yisrael Savatfuna Heim Be'ois Hei the Shem Havaya. The Yisrael Savatfuna is the letter Hey of Shem Havaya, the second letter. When his Boyasham, and he explains it, the higher, even higher than Yisrael Savatfuna, we said, remember, the Yichud Chodesh, the new innovation, not the Ovis. Heim Be'ois Yud is in the letter Yud. So here we go. Maybe that's why he's not speaking about Bina and Chachma, because it's confusing enough as it is. So now we have, a new thing is happening now. We have Chachma Bina lower, that's Yisrael Saba and Tfuna. That's the Midas in Chachma and Bina, or Nehi in Chachma and Bina. And then you have the higher Abba Vima as Moichen Be'etzem.
I think the difference is that
So now, one second. The lower one that I just said, Abba V'im Tatoin, which is Yisrael Saba, is the Hey of Shem Havaya. So within in Chachma Bina itself, which is a Yud, it itself also has a Yud Kei Vav Kei. So he says, Ta'amili Vav Dalal tu Bina v'akol nichol b'hayud.
That's Avoy Loin.
Yeah. In other words, when you look write out Yud, there's a dot, Yud is dot, then you write Yud Vav Dalet. Vav Dalet is the Bina within it, but it's all Hakol Nichol B'Yud, but it's all in the Yud. So this letter Yud, when we call B'Miluyah, so let me explain that. Letters in Alpha and Hebrew obviously have the letter. There are many other elements. There's gematria, there's the count, there's the number, there's the shape, there's the meaning, right? But there are other things called a milui. A milui means when you write it out. For example, when we speak about Shem, Ma, Ban, Sag, Ma, and Ab, that's the different configurations of the miluyim. So, like he explains in Tanya, but more in there's a called Rusha Miluyim from the Alter Rebbe. He explains miluyim is that just like what is a milui? Milui is something that's not obvious when you pronounce the word. Like when you say Shema, you don't say Shin, Yud, Nun. Shin. You say Sh, the Ma. But when you spell out Shin, would be Shin Yud Nun. Ma is Mem Hey. And then Ayin Yud Nun. So he explains that everything in life, you have the obvious meaning of it, and the Milui gives you like the inner story, the inside story. So when you really want to know what something means, you want to know it, not just the obvious. So whatever name you have, let's say, Eliezer. Eliezer is the name. It means Keilezer, it means helping God. Right. Exactly. The same idea. Eliezer was drew and poured for others. Or a name like Tzvi, or Moshe, or Avram, or Zalman. Okay, so we have everybody's names. I don't want to discriminate. So a name is the name. The name has meaning. But if you want to know the deeper dimensions, Eliezer would be Eliezer's Aleph Lamed Pei, which has a meaning also. And it has gematria. So sometimes the gematria. So now it's a dimension beneath the surface. Think of it like that. So basically, now go back to here. So when we speak Yud Kei Vav Kei, generally it's Yud Kei Vav Kei. But more specifically, Chachma is Yud, obviously. So he's saying now that in Eitz Chaim he says that in the Chachma Bina itself, so Sabatuna is the Hey of Shem Havaya. And the Yud of Shem Havaya is the higher Chachma Bina. And that also has a Chachma Bina, because their Bina is the Vav Dalet in the Yud. Akol Nichol B'Yud. V'Abba Imet Tatayin, which is Yisrael Saba Tfuna, just for the record. Heim Be'eisei, Rishein Nesheve, Ksivosei Hu She'eisen Tchili Yud, V'achakach Eisen Memenu Ha'hei. So the Abba is Eisei. How do you make an Eisei? When you write it, every letter you write, you always begin with a Yud. You can't write a letter without making a dot. So you begin, he says, making a yud, and from the top of the hay, you begin with there. So if the corner of the top, the roof of the hay is a yud. And you just extend it, and you make a line down, and then you make the left leg.
You wish that a line with a point.
Well, that says that clearly. I mean, in Safras, that's what you do. Everything starts with a yud. A shin, whatever. Okay. So now, what do we have? So tchiliyud v'akach esem menuvin v'hen yisol sav v'tfuna de b'chlal u'b'chinas bina. In general, that's the level of bina.
The whole hay?
Hay in general, we say yud. Usually in Sfirz goes yud is chachma, hay is bina, vav is zah, midas, and malchus is the last hay. Here he's obviously talking in chachma itself, chachma and bina actually. So you have yisol sav and tfuna is basically chachma and bina, the lower chachma and bina. Okay? Lower chachma bina. Then you have.
But the focus is on the hay, and the stress is on the hay.
Yeah.
The first one.
And the stress is on the hay. That's an ois hay of Shem Havaya. And chachma bina elayin, abi elayin, is the stress is on the yud. The yud also has a vav daled. That's the bina in it, and the hay also has a yud, which is the chachma in it. So the question is, what's your focus on? So each has a yud. One is the yud is the main and has a vav dal bina within it, and shal shabat funa bina is the primary. The hay is the primary and it has a yud, the chachma within it. That's what he says in Eitz Chaim. Remember, don't be intimidated by the cryptic elements of this. It's just levels. This is the mechanics of it. Then we're going to go and understand it. Remember, it all comes back to. See, the Rebbe Rashab is grounding it in real sources and these aces, but it comes down to, just keep in mind, it's the Ovis drawing down Elikus into the world from the highest level of the point all the way through Binat into existence. That's what you got to keep in mind. And it'll make it a lot easier than the level Yisrael Saba and Funa. And that's Yisrael Saba and Funa essentially. So replace Yisrael Saba with Midas of Meichen or Chachma. Tfuna is Bina, Midas of Bina. And then there's a higher level of Abba Ve'ima. I'm not saying it's not complicated, but I know that sometimes you read this, you almost like dismiss and say, okay, let's skip this over and get. But it's really just the code language for what I just described as being drawing down through these levels. But he's grounding it. It's grounded in real sources. It's not just Asius. So the pella is that someone who learned Eitz Chaim, how they know what it meant. That's the question. But that goes back to when you learn Chumash without Rashi, how they know what it meant. But it'd be quite amazing that a Mekubal was able to read one line in Eitz Chaim and that's the Hamshach of Eris and Kalim and Gvul and so on. Or you could say, that's why we say Kabbalah is a beer and Chassidus, not Chassidus is a beer and Kabbalah. You know? Kabbalah is giving you the elements on the map, but the real explanation of it is what Chassidus says about it all.
No, just learn.
B'noida.
Later on, if you learn the Chachma, you'll know everything. If you know the Mishnah, a real top guy will know everything, the prices and everything associated with and the whole Gemara from the.
Yeah. Let me just. I have to move a little quicker here because it's not.
It's 10 o'clock.
Leave 10 minutes. I'm going to leave. V'noida the Yud Shem Havaya, and it's known that the Yud of Shem Havaya obchinas Atzilus Shabbat Atzilus. The Yud of Shem Havaya is Atzilus within Atzilus. Dainu Atzmis Atzilus. It means the core nature of Atzilus. Now let me just say one thing about these, because of this again.
Which is Chachma.
Which is Chachma. That this also sometimes it's not explained properly. When Chassidus keeps talking about Hiskalus, microcosm, macrocosm, like the hologram, it's not just cute, and just complicate matters. The fact is, existence is a unified entity. And unity dictates that despite the diversity, it really is the same things repeated in different forms and fashions. Now obviously there's a real structure. A fire is not water. But the point of the matter is that everything really encompasses everything else, with one thing being a primary element. Like, what is it? A human body has 70% water?
Yeah.
But you think 70% water? Where's the water? I mean, you see a body, you don't see any water. Like those two Chassidim were learning the Kutei Torah, and it says, the Alter Rebbe says that 2/3 of the earth is covered in water and 1/3 is land. So one Chassid says to the next, wherever I look, I see land. Where's this water? So he says, okay, the Alter Rebbe says that you have to accept it with Amunah. My point is, why? Because the water is part of so much other things going on that you don't see it. It blends in. But the point is that, in other words, Atzilus is understanding. When you say something, you want to say, what is the Atzilus within Atzilus? The core nature of Atzilus is. If you want to say, what is the core Atzilus as it relates to Biyah, you say Bria and Atzilus. So think of a teacher. You want to know describe a teacher. So if you want to say him as a teacher, you have to say him, he's a teacher to students. So you describe him in the context of how good he teaches. But if someone says, is that really his core? No, you want to know the teacher within the teacher, so to speak. You have to go to how he thinks about ideas outside of students. So you can have the same entity, it just depends what you're focusing on. If you're focusing on the thing within the thing itself, then you're talking about its personality. Then you're talking about its relationship with something else, then you're saying the Bria within Atzilus, the Yetzirah within Atzilus. Just a way to communicate. So Hainu Atzmis Atzilus, that's Yud. So in other words, going back, Abba v'imei Eloyin is really the Atzim of Atzilus, basically. For Eis Hei b'chinas Bria sheba Atzilus. Because just like in the spheres, Yud Kei Vav Kei is Chachma Bina Midas Malchus, in the Eilumis, Atzilus is Yud, Bria is Hei, Yetzirah is Vav, and Asiyah is Hei, the last Hei. So they all are. So they're all there. But don't mistake that Asiyah is the Hei of Atzilus. Hei of Atzilus is just in the level of Atzilus. It already has an element that's going to relate to Asiyah. That doesn't make it Asiyah. Just keep that in mind. So the Hei is b'chinas bina b'chinas bria sheba Atzilus. The Ba'abiyah sheba Atzilus b'chinas habina she Hei Rishen L'Shem Havaya bria sheba Atzilus. Because Abiyah within Atzilus we have 4 worlds. Atzilus Bria Yetzirah, as I said, as they relate to them. So the Bina, Bina, the first hey, not the last day. The first day, B'chinas Bria Shabbat Atzilus, v'Chachma Shu Eisyu T'Shem Havaya B'chinas Atzilus Shabbat Atzilus. Okay. So in other words, everything we learned about Atzilus now can all be zeroed in into the Chochmah, the highest level of Chochmah. It's real Atzilus manifests. If you do that, Atzilus b'chinas Gilui Amhus Delakus, and it's known that Atzilus is the revelation of the personality of the divine. V'hu shemeir shamuhus erakav, that the muhus erakav radiates there. So even though we say all of Atzilus is Alakus, say Iyu v'chayu echad, Iyu v'gamur echad, the energies are one, the containers are one. Yet we also say Chochmah is the conduit. Where's the first place that the godliness manifests? In Atzilus is in Chochmah. And from there it will extend to the rest. So that's what he's saying here. So in Chochmah, what is that? That's the Muhus Er HaKav. So we know the Kav comes all the way from after the Tzimtzum and rooted all the way to the energy before the Tzimtzum. So the personality of the Kav in all the spheres of Atzilus, Chochmah is the main place where it resides, or where it relates to Kilimut. This is the primary difference, the general difference between Atzilus and Biyah. The Be'elim is Biyah, B'chinas HaYediyas HaMetzias Levad. In Biyah, you only know that there's a God. But you're not, it's like saying, we say Metzias, as I said many times, Yediyas Metzias means you know that your family exists, but you don't see them right here. Because they left the room, they're not in the room. So you know they're Metzias. You can't say Muchus. I'm not talking about because you know them from memory, I'm talking about right now. So someone walks into, it's not a good example, family, because you know them. Let's say someone walks into this room right now, you never met him before, that's Muchus. Then he leaves the room, or someone tells you he exists, that's Metzias. Metzias is basically being told a story about something, and Muchus is experiencing it yourself. And, there are sometimes different explanations, but that for practical purposes is a good way to, Atzilus experiences it. And Bria hears about it. But it hears. In Asiyah, Chumri, where we are, we don't even hear. We're told the story, obviously, but we don't really hear it because we have a lot of blockages. But Biyah hears it. It's like a makabel that hears from Moshe Rabbeinu, tell me what's going on in the world of God, and you hear it in full glory. So there's a lot going on in Biyah. There's no, but it's not. You can't say it's a direct personal experience. It's a reflection of. That's what reflection means. It's like someone seeing a beautiful piece of art, and someone being telling another person that's what it looks like, and you say, "Wow, that's beautiful." But it's not like you didn't actually see it. We say sometimes "ma koi like Mukoi and Zeh. So Zeh means Zeh. Here I'm pointing to it. Koi means I could describe it. Okay. Humas Akav. Zel calls Rabbi Nazir. The Elmas Be'ahi Bechin Siyam Tzivlad. Ubat Silas Meir Gili. Meir Gili Amuchus Delakuz. Muhus Akav. Muhus Akav. So we don't even have the Metzias of the Kav, but Muhus Akav means it's directly experiencing the light itself, not a reflection of it, not a story of it, not an echo, not a diminished. It's the Muhus Akav. Well, okay, not diminished, but it's the Muhus. Yeah. And there you go. And even though the Kav itself is a reflection, very nice, only if the Ma'atzma say Ein Sof from the core of Ein Sof, which itself is also only from Atzmus. And what radiates in Atzilus and illuminates that's only a reflection of a Kav. Nevertheless, yes, it's true, it's a reflection. But the reflection itself, Atzilus, is comprehended by Atzilus, the actual personality of this reflection. Okay. So obviously there's all levels.
So are we able to experience Mahus in Olam Masiyah Gashmi?
You can, but that's a different discussion, and I would have to, you have to find the examples of it. Muhus. The problem is that the tzimtzum and the layers are so profound that even if you experience muhus, it's either fleeting or it's extremely diluted. I mean, you have examples of it. Look, when we say Yom Kippur, when a neshama is awakes, or those moments of magical moments, moments of truth, it's in a muhus. But you know how hard it is to hold on to that. That's like,
You have to have that nihi, those handles.
I have to stop here because I have to go to this thing and I have no way around that. Even though I'd love to continue, I will continue. But I know the Sunday group. Welcome back. Okay, let's stop here. We did the beginning of Maimer 35, page Reis Samachay, the beginning of chapter 137.